And I said, okay, cool. That's what we hear sort of everywhere, but that was there. If they'd have said $47.93, we would have used $47.93. So that's how we got it. And then once you collect that and you start plugging it into this template, by and large, if you have the answers to those 10 questions, it basically spits it out and says, here's projected what you would do on this surgeon. And then you can just scale it across your system, other surgeons, other procedures, and see how much time, money, and space you would save.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you bite dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
On this vendor spotlight, I will be speaking with Mark Copeland, VP of Sales at 3T Medical Systems. Mark recently joined us to talk about some of the success that he's had, highlighting the benefits of taking a value analysis perspective to the hospitals and really working to make sure that all engaged stakeholders, whenever you decide to make a product conversion, are involved. And today we're going a little bit deeper. We're going to be highlighting several different value analysis overviews that quantifies the financial and operational impacts to an organization when switching from blue wrap to one tray and easy tracks. We're going to break it down all for you today. We're going to highlight one of these value analysis overviews in our discussion with Mark and get the background on how this started and why this is such a valuable tool in helping sterile processing department leadership make a business case for switching to one tray and easy tracks. We're going to break it all down in terms of cost, space, and time savings. Up next with Mark Copeland.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Speaking now, once again, with Mark Copeland, VP of Sales at 3T Medical Systems. And Mark, we had you on a recent episode, and we talked a lot about the fact that you and I have known each other for quite a while. We both live in that central PA, eastern PA area. Today we're going to get into a little bit more detail about some of the value that you've been offering customers, not only in this region, but beyond that as well. And value analysis was very much a topic on our last conversation, was how do we make these business cases? And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that today and highlight some case studies and a comprehensive value analysis overview that you helped put together for IST One Tray. So welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's always great to be here. And value analysis, it's one of the big hurdles everybody faces. And it's also one of the most important things any of us in this field are going to have to not deal with, understand, right? So if we help a little bit here, I'd be very excited if we were able to do that.
Well, and I'll tell you, we touched on this theme last time because you were talking about how and the why behind not only speaking to other industry representatives and speaking to sterile processing as an advocate and to the operating room, but why to get involved with value analysis. And honestly, what we're expecting from vendors is a lot more today than it was in the past. And I think making these business cases is not something necessarily that everybody gets trained on. And so, being able to present that value is critical for any department leader that is looking to make some transformational changes in their organization. And so I think today's conversation is going to be great because we have a tool that will be made available as bonus content if you've downloaded the Beyond Clean smartphone app for iPhone or Android, where you can really kind of see that. And also Mark, you're not afraid to get into the weeds and dig in a little bit and do an assessment. So we're going to get into all of that, but I thought we could start with just an overview of the project, because I realize that this is what we're sharing with everybody is kind of a summary and a highlight of that, but there's a lot more that went into it. So how did you even get started with trying to put this together?
Well, briefly, Justin, you and I have been in this long enough that when we both got into med device, or obviously you started with it as a nurse, at least on my side of the table, let's call it salespeople, we're trained on the clinical side, so that we could talk to a surgeon or a nurse and say, hey, this will benefit your patient this way or shorten. Med device was really good at that for a long time. But the buying process has changed considerably. And so I've tried to change with it. And that's sort of where we've gotten to. So to fast forward to your actual question, we had an account that was a very, very savvy, smart sterile processing director who was frustrated because they were doing a lot of joints and they were having to reprocess 7 trays for every total joint. And she just felt like that was sort of, well, she was right. It was inefficient, but it was what had to be done. And when she looked at Easy Tracks and One Tray, she was like, hey, I'm interested in this. And so we decided, we were basically trying to figure out a way to make it work for them in this new buying paradigm, let's call it. Well, that makes me sound really smart when I use words like that. But yeah, that's what we were trying to do. And to her credit, she was super smart recognizing the silos as well. Finance, operating room, surgeon, vendor rep, and sterile processing. And so she and I did it in a way that I think was moving forward the way I have done it in every single place since then with some success. And they've been really happy. So that's really what it was, is how do we do this and prove to those other folks and get their buy-in that this is a good idea, because she knew they would benefit from it, but she was smart enough to go, but I need others to benefit from it as well. And that's really how this started.
And, we talked about this last time as well, but I want to reemphasize that value analysis is kind of that silo buster. You talked about her recognizing the silos that everybody exists in. And so value analysis pulls in all the stakeholder viewpoints and sort of collates them to help everybody land on a decision. So when you were working with this individual, you were already gathering the data, and then you started to present that and try to help put together that business case so people could see the fiscal and operational impact to making a change to One Tray and Easy Tracks. And, we've talked in the past about reducing the number of trays that are needed, to be reprocessed for the case, and, how that creates some efficiencies. But, efficiencies might only be beneficial to sterile processing. And when you start to pull in that financial analysis, that's where all of a sudden it's like supply chain wants to be involved. OR leadership, business managers want to be involved and see what this could really do to impact the budget, depending on who holds it. But everybody's stewards of it in surgical services. So everybody's working together. So now you've kind of decided, like, let's formalize this process. But part of that includes a free assessment. And so I think, we're going to go into a little bit more detail into the assessment itself. But when we share these findings out there, you're expecting this to be quite repeatable. I know we've got 4 different case studies that we're highlighting today, but you expect this to be a pretty streamlined process.
Yeah, I think what we found with this first one was that we could create a template. And I think I was thinking about it. I think it's actually like 10 total questions that somebody who wanted to do this would need to go get the answers to. And the funny part is, if they're involved in it, they probably know 2 or 3 of the answers of the 10 questions already, because it touched all those groups. So we found this was repeatable. And what we wanted to do was make it into a template and make it repeatable and scalable for places, because that's what everybody needs. So we put it together so that a vendor rep could call and do it. A sterile processing director could do it. A surgeon could do it. A finance person could actually do it, because, like you said, they collate. It's sort of the umbrella over all the silos is value analysis. And you just have to capture some data. And everybody knows it. It's just very few people are sharing it across the silos. So that's what she and I did. Right. And it's totally repeatable. So that's, I think one of the cool things about this is no matter how big or how small or what type of facility you are, if you're doing total joints, this likely will apply to what you're dealing with. And that was really the goal, right? So.
All right. So now we're going to get into the various assessments and analysis and what's really included in that analysis. But before we do that, I do, kind of want to mention that you were very selective in the different analysis that we're going to include in this summary. And you got a small community hospital. That's the one we're going to be talking about in great detail here in a moment. Then we have a large community level 1 trauma center, an academic medical center level 1 trauma center, and then a large private urban level 2 trauma center. So we're really covering the gamut in terms of the application here. So let's talk about what's included in the analysis. You said there was like 10 questions. What are you looking for?
Yeah, it's a good question. We were basically trying to prove 3 things: saving time, space, and money, right? So, and if you can put time as efficiency, but it was really, do we shorten our time? Do we save money? And do we improve the space issues that we have? And it's funny, that sort of ended up being not just shelf space, back table space. So it really sort of as we got into it, we realized it was more than what the space we were just thinking about initially. So, yeah.
So you're going to be looking at current costs, the number of instrument sets that are required, processing time. You mentioned space, very clearly there. But then you're also basing it all on a certain number of total knees that are being done annually. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. So we wanted to know, if we start on something, what would we do? What would we save if we just did, we had to start small, start with a surgeon on a procedure. Would we save money, space, and time? That was it, right? And what would those savings be? And we measured them.
And that's the first value analysis that you put together, which is the one that we're going to be highlighting today here in just a little bit. But it was one surgeon doing 120 total knees a year. So we'll be diving into that. How did you collect the data? Was it simply that survey, or did you have to get hands-on a little bit?
It was pretty simple because of the sterile processing director, who and I were sort of the same mind. We basically just went and figured out, all right, sterile processing, give me your data, give me your times. And we captured it. We went to the OR and said, give me your times, captured those. We used finance data from them that was there. So like, for instance, I remember saying to them, what do you estimate your cost per tray to be to reprocess it? And they said $50. And I said, okay, cool. That's what we hear sort of everywhere, but that was there. If they'd have said $47.93, we would have used $47.93. So that's how we got it. And then once you collect that and you start plugging it into this template, by and large, if you have the answers to those 10 questions, it basically spits it out and says, here's projected what you would do on this surgeon. And then you can just scale it across your system, other surgeons, other procedures, and see how much time, money, and space you would save. It's really not very hard, but very few people are doing it across the silos. She and I both sort of did that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's pretty easy to put it together. Another question I have is, it seems like you've done these assessments based on Blue Wrap, but how would this play out for a facility that might already be using rigid containers? Would the numbers look the same or different? How does that work?
For the most part, they would be extremely similar. They would probably mirror each other most of the cases. So.
All right. So let's get into this particular example that's going to be shared as bonus content. Again, on the smartphone app, we'll also have a link in the description for you to be able to download it if you don't have the Beyond Clean smartphone app for iPhone and Android. But there's a doctor, a specific surgeon, who is, like we said, doing 120 total knees a year. And so how did you start breaking this down? And I'm looking at the document, and if you're out there and you're listening on the smartphone app, you can pull this up and look at this example as well as we walk through it. But, how many trays were they, reprocessing for those 120 total knees? And then maybe walk us through the impact on the numbers here.
Yeah. So I'll back it up. We wanted to start with consignment sets in the hospital, right? So consigned TKA sets, total knee arthroplasty sets in this case. And they wanted to do it with a specific surgeon, partly because they thought the rep and the surgeon would be amenable to doing it, right? They thought everybody would buy in sooner. So it's one surgeon, 120 total knees a year, and they had 3 total knee sets for the surgeon on their shelf, which equated to 7 instrument trays per total knee. So 7 trays per instrument set, 3 sets. So they had 21 sets of consigned total knee instrument sets for this guy to do those 120 cases every year. So that, and what they wanted to do was migrate all 100% of the instruments that are in those sets into Easy Tracks and see how much they could cut down on the amount of trays that they were doing in their instrument sets for total knee, if that makes sense. So it really wasn't all that hard because everybody had the data ready to go. So we went and said, all right, how long does it take you to reprocess? And Justin, I can walk through this any way you want, but we were saying like over a year.
Well, high level, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about what? I'm looking at this. You're going from 7 trays down to 3 trays.
Yep.
So you've got a current cost and a projected cost breakdown from that reduction. So like you said, their metric, and obviously every facility is going to be different, which is what I love about this because it's a, tailored assessment based on how the organization looks at their business, not based on what you're saying. This is what we believe it costs. You're saying, how do you attribute the reprocessing cost here? Let's put it in how your business terms, how you assess it. So at $50 a tray for each case, you're taking 7 trays times $50. You're saying in their current state, they were spending about $350 to reprocess versus down to 3 trays, $150. So that's more than a 50% savings. And you're saving about $200 per case. This is one surgeon, right? So
one surgeon.
This would extrapolate with multiple surgeons to be a much greater annual savings. But if you annualize that based on 120 total knees, you're looking at about $24,000 of savings just for this one surgeon in reprocessing costs. And
annually.
I gotta be honest with you, I think that $50 per tray is actually conservative. And so I'm going to put that out there. I've heard a lot of range of numbers as well, but at the same point, it's like you said, you want to make sure that this is relevant to how people evaluate their business.
Yeah. And we pulled their data. That's why, I'm an outsider. I'm a salesperson. If we use my data, there's going to be some skepticism to it. I mean, that's natural, right? But if you use their data, it's much harder to be skeptical of your own data. It's yours. So yeah, could I get into an argument and say, I think your tray cost is $75? Maybe. Why? It's their data. You're like, it's $50. We're going to use it. So we knew it was $200 per procedure that we would save in reprocessing costs. But I think that's where a lot of people stop. They don't say, well, let's look at that over a year. What would that look like? And that's what we ran that out. Like you said, it ended up being $24,000 a year just in reprocessing. But as you know, just because Sterile Processing or the vendor rep or the OR or finance wants to do it, everybody else sort of has, to a certain extent, veto power, right? So you got to get other people to buy in. So what she and I'll give her most of the credit, we went and needed to get buy-in also from, believe it or not, the operating room, obviously, maybe the surgeon. The hardest people to convince to do this are the vendor reps because they're nervous, because they're the ones who get instruments lost. They're the ones who open up the trays and something's not there and people start barking at them up in the operating room. But this guy was open to it and we wanted to make sure he understood the benefits he would get too. So we needed to get some buy-in in all these groups and do the financial analysis to present to finance. We didn't want them doing it for us because they don't understand any of this stuff.
Yeah, and you need to collaborate with the people who are going to live with any kind of change on a day-to-day basis to make sure that they've got stake in the game as well. And when I look at the time savings, like I see the stake in the game for sterile processing. You're talking about 7 trays versus 3 trays, and you've got it broken down by time in decon, in the washer, setup, sterilization, dry time, opening, and breakdown. And so that right there, this is, and I would say this is all stakeholders, right? Because we're obviously including the operating room. It's the entire life cycle that's represented in the time savings. But again, for one case, 7 trays down to 3 trays, the way you've calculated this is total time is about 304 minutes for an entire case. And then total time, when you take that from 7 down to 3, is 141 minutes, which is a savings per case of over 2.5 hours, coming in at 2.72 hours.
2.78 hours, right? I think is what we calculated.
Extrapolate that over, 120 total knees.
Right.
And you're getting pretty close.
3 a day, however somebody wants to look at it. So we said time, we saved 2.78 hours down to 100, right? Space, we end up saving them 5 feet of space per sort of those 3 sets. And then money, we just showed like $200 a case, $24,000 a year, $112,000 over 5 years. And it's simple math. I mean, I'm an English major and even I can do that math, right? So cool. Sterile processing is, let's do this. Hold on, big fella, right? We got to get the OR involved. And when we went and presented it to the OR was looking at these and they're like, 7 instead of 3. First question, do I have all my instruments? Well, they're all right there. And then they start telling us, hang on, what they would say, we'll love this. Well, why? Right? And they would say, well, we need to shorten our turnover time, setting up and breaking down after cases. We have metrics specific. We're trying to lower it. And they were like, we think this will do it. After we evaluated it for a couple of cases, and then they started tracking it, we shortened their turnover time by 6 minutes. And you could attribute it to a couple of things, like you're opening less trays, and you can look and go, type 5s are right there. Everything I need is right here. Go get the patient. So they were able to go get the patient sooner. And then breaking down at the end of the case, they also didn't need it. They told us, hey, we don't need an extra back table, space, right? So we got time, space, and oddly enough, we didn't even measure 6 minutes times $50 a minute in the OR and say, hey, there's an additional $300 that you're sort of saving there. We weren't savvy enough to do that at the time. I would do that now. But they just saw turnover times drop by 6 minutes, less of a back table. And they were like, we're in, because as long as they have all our instruments, we're in. And then when you put that together and you're saying, all we needed was the rep to be happy, frankly. And we needed to show, they had to make sure their concerns were met, which is all my instruments are going to be there. They're not going to be lost. And then they found out after tracking it for about a year, informally, their needs for, loaners were down 24%. And that's a hard number to put a dollar value on, but it's a major benefit to the rep, the OR.
That's about getting the stakeholders aligned. Like you can't always show a financial return, but oftentimes it's a pretty obvious benefit. And I think the financial return is significant here. So as we kind of wrap up the walkthrough, you've got a breakdown of the 3-year savings based on this one surgeon, 120 total knees. You're saying in this case, 6 easy track trays need to be purchased. They already had 3 trays in their inventory. So their projected investment was like $7,200. So when you back that out for year 1, they're essentially, with the savings calculated at $200 per case and based on, 120, cases spread out over the year, it takes about 3.6 months.
Right. It's paid
for them to recover their investment and then start realizing the savings. So you've got it here over 3 years, one surgeon, 120 total knees a year. Again, remember, this could draw out over multiple surgeons at a facility. Year one savings, $16,800, backing out the investment, and then the full $24,000 the next 2 years. So in a 3-year savings opportunity, you've got wrapped up in this particular value analysis example, and this is a real facility. Their total savings over 3 years was projected at $64,800, almost $65,000 for one surgeon. And, the interesting thing is, even when you draw that out, depending on how many trays you have, right? And, the inventory, as you draw that out over more surgeons, you probably are realizing that investment recovery even quicker.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And two things that sort of came out of it that, people were happy with it at the site was they're like, great. They started it. They loved it. Then they started rolling it out to other surgeons and other procedures. So to, as you said, sort of raise like the savings and the efficiency and the effectiveness across that whole cycle from sterile processing to the OR and back, and the money, time, and space savings. And even the rep was happy. And the surgeons that were happy. I mean, like, again, we talked about it. It's a win, 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 and you start to hit all the stakeholders. Finance couldn't have, and the true way we knew people would like it is the perioperative services director. We took all this data, and instead of putting some goofy spreadsheet that nobody reads, we put pictures next to it. We put it on 2 pages, and that's the template, we're talking about today, and said, here. And halfway through it, as we were showing it to perioperative services, she stopped us and said, please tell me we're doing this. Okay. I mean, that's, and we're like, yep. Okay. I think we're going to ended up being about $8,000 they needed to invest to get all this. So it was very low money, small money, very simple fix. And everybody was happy without never had to worry about patient care once all the groups, patient care remained the same. And in some cases you could probably say maybe it was better. I don't know that I could go that far, but everybody won. So if, I have like the 10 questions and things like that, but it's all in the template to ask, but it's simple things. Like you could drop me in an account and we could do it in 2 minutes. You could be a surgeon and walk around and ask these questions and you'd be able to do it. Like it's that, hopefully that's what we believe it is, to be that simple. And it's applicable across rural, urban, academic, private. Level 1, level 3, lots of joints, some, doesn't big, small. I sound like Dr. Seuss right now. It doesn't matter. It applies.
The assessment's not really, or the analysis is not really facility based. It's surgeon and procedure based.
Yeah. So Justin, and you'll see in that some reps have like, hey, I've already tried to streamline my trays. I've gone from, I'm at 4 now. But when they looked at easy tracks and did it, they went down to 2. So is 4 to 2 as good as 7 to 3? No. Is it better? Yes. Is it consequential? Significantly. Right. So,
right. Especially when you look at volumes, case volume has a lot to do with how you build the total savings. But yeah, this is phenomenal. And, I do want to remind everybody, I know I've said it a few times, but we have this value analysis overview, 4 different examples of the analysis available to you for download and viewing from the Beyond Clean smartphone app on iPhone and Android. We'll also have a link to download the PDF in the description. So if you haven't downloaded the app, you can still get the information. And I also want to tell everybody that they can reach out to you, Mark, if they want some help with this, or maybe they want to walk through some of these analyses. And your email is mcope67@gmail.com. Anything you kind of want to add to that?
Well, and people can find me on LinkedIn, and I have a lot of people who look me up on LinkedIn after these things and then DM me, whatever is easiest for people. It's pretty easy, but I just think we all see what's going on in operating rooms and sterile processing departments. And if you can bring in time and space savings and cost savings, you're speaking the language to every group that needs to sign off on these things. And that's the value analysis umbrella that you were talking about early on. And I think it's hard for anybody to say, no, we shouldn't be doing this but you have to do the work up front. And this makes that work really, hopefully, I know it does, really easy because we've used it at a bunch of places. And then we have a form that they can show to anybody and capture it all, and it makes sense. And it's not sort of a boring spreadsheet. Nothing against spreadsheets, but they're kind of boring. Actually, a lot. Yeah. So use pictures, dollars, images, and your batting average goes up. And that's it. That's what we're going to do.
All right, Mark. Well, I do want to encourage everybody to be following you on LinkedIn. You've really hit a home run with the content, and you get a lot of engagement and discussion on your posts, which is the sign of somebody who is saying something that is resonating with everybody out there in the industry and following. So I think you've done a really nice job of kind of calling this out. And I think also just helping reps understand value analysis. I think a lot of times people outside of the facility struggle to understand, what's really going on internally to help coordinate, all these different departments so that they don't exist in a silo and that their efforts are coordinated. So keep up the good work on educating everybody on, as they say, on both sides of the table out there in the industry with your content.
Well, thanks. We all know that if everybody understands value analysis better, who wins? The patient. That's the patient wins. And that's why we're in this in the first place.
All right, everybody. Mark Copeland, VP of Sales at 3T Medical Systems, talking about some value analysis overviews that we're making available and an assessment to help you project the savings and the impact at your organization. Mark, just a great interview as always. Looking forward to having you on again in the future.
Thanks, buddy. It's always good to talk to you.
All right, everybody. Mark Copeland, VP of Sales at 3T Medical Systems, back on the show here for a Vendor Spotlight podcast highlighting the benefits of switching to one tray and easy tracks to achieve cost savings, space savings, and time savings. So you can get those value analysis overviews by going to the Beyond Clean smartphone app for iPhone or Android. You can also visit the website to download it directly at, insert the link here, which we'll also have in the description and write-up for this episode. I think Mark put in a great deal of effort to help formalize this process. So now there's a tool out there for everybody that's involved in any kind of transformational change, but like switching to one tray and easy tracks to see where everybody wins in cost, space, and time savings. Big thanks to Mark for coming on the show and talking today. And thank you for listening to this Vendor Spotlight on Beyond Clean.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.